Hello guys, Alan here and welcome to the channel. And in this video we are going to be dealing with the massing environment in Revit. Alright, is a very interesting topic inside of Revit, and I feel everyone should be able to understand the massing environment when it comes to the Revit software. Alright, so what I mean by the massing environment in Revit, or the conceptual massing in Revit, is that you see all of those intricate designs that Zaha Hadid, there are forms of buildings where it kind of takes a different shape and all of those styles. All right, so that's what I mean by the massing environment in Revit. So we are going to be looking at a tutorial where we can actually achieve that sort of designs inside of the Revit software, right? It tends to be very difficult if you would want to create some sort of like those kind of designs where you have the walls curving and very intricate designs. All right, so I'm going to show you guys how you can use Revit to achieve any kind of intricate design that you want to achieve actually. All right, so we are going to be looking at that in this series for the rest of the weeks. For the next few days we are going to be looking at that inside of the Revit software. All right, so without wasting much time, I'm going to get started. But before I get started, if you're watching this video and you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, please do make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. It's going to help me out a lot, and it's probably not going to cost you anything. So just make sure you like and subscribe to my channel, and you can drop a comment in the comment section, and I'll do what to respond to each and every one of you guys out there. All right, and I've also started a community where I'm kind of training people and teaching people how to actually maximize their workflow inside of the Revit software. So I'm just gathering a lot of people where I'm going to be training them inside of the Revit software, and it's going to come at a fee. So if you're interested, you can send me an email or you can contact me through any of my socials right below this video. All right, so we are going to get started now. And when you look on top of this ribbon right here, where we have this architecture, structure, and all of those stuff right here, I think I have a tutorial where I'm actually talking about the structure. I'm yet to give you guys a tutorial on steel. I've given you guys a tutorial on precast. If you check the concrete structure series, you're going to see that in there. But when you head all the way here to this right here, we have massing and site. All right, so when you click on that in there, you notice we have a few bits of commands in there that we can actually use, but this commands here is what we actually use for our site. All right, when we were actually dealing with the site design, we used this one. All right, we came in here and then we often came into the massing and site. So this is for the massing environment, and then this is for your site environment. All right, so we are going to be dealing with the massing site. So when it comes to us creating all of those shapes, unique shapes, and you want to achieve all of those kind of intricate designs, all right, it's going to be very difficult if you are using just your walls, because your walls tend to go from like level to level. All right, if I should go to any elevation in there, you're going to notice your walls tend to go from just levels to other levels. All right, you cannot really create that intricate design where you can actually curve it up a little bit and then create that kind of design that you want to create. All right, it's really very difficult to use the walls in there. So Revit has gotten this feature in there where you can actually use your massing environment to create all of those things. All right, so if you use your mass to create that conceptual mass inside of the Revit software, then you can just easily come in here and then apply the wall to that conceptual mass. Now you notice when I leave the mouse pointer on that, we have a little thumbnail giving us a little bit of explanation, how a little bit of a fair idea of how that is going to come in together. So the conceptual mass is going to come off like the shape you see in there, or any kind of shape you want. So you can actually create any kind of shape that you want, and then you can use that command to apply the wall to it. So now our wall is going to be curved. All right, when we definitely can use the ones in the architecture tab. All right, so the same thing applies for the roofs, the floors, the curtain system, and all of that. So with this in place mask, we can actually import a mask in there, and this is to show the mask. All right, so you need to make sure you show your mask first before you start to draw in your mask inside of your project. All right, so now there are actually two ways you can actually draw this masses in Revit. All right, there are actually two ways you can actually draw those intricate designs. You can either do them inside of your project or in your file. In this project, we can actually do them in here, or we can do them in they have their own template. All right, their family editor template, where we can actually go in there and then we can draw out the shape, and then we can load in that shape into our project here. All right, so it's really much very simple. So I'm going to take you guys a whole lot of process on how we can create some designs, and we are going to take a real life building having the same kind of shape or an intricate shape, and then we are going to try as much as we can to actually draw that inside of the Revit software. So it's going to be an interesting series. Just make sure you sit back and follow along with every step in the way. Now, don't be too quick to ask questions. All right, sometimes the questions you would want to ask, I might answer them in the course of the video. So just make sure you watch every single thing, and then when you finish watching this very first part, then you can drop a comment in the comment section, and I'll do what to respond to each and every one of you guys out there. All right, so with this series, I'm not going to be doing it inside of the project. I'm going to do it inside the family editor template. All right, so how you can actually access or get to that template is just click on this icon right there, and then go into your families in there. Just go into new in there, and then you can go into your English folder. All right, and then when you head straight into your English folder, you notice in here we have conceptual mask. All right, you can click on that conceptual mask, and we have the metric mask in there. So I'm going to be using this one to create and show you guys how you can actually create all of those intricate shapes and those Zaha Hadid kind of concepts and all of those things you have, and those wild shapes you have in your mind. All right, we are going to be trying as much as possible to be able to draw that inside of the Revit software. So I'm going to click on this metric mask in there, and I'm going to click on open right there, and perfect. So now we are now currently inside of this template. All right, and you notice in here inside of this template we have, when I just hover my mouse pointer in there, you notice we have this reference planes in there. Right, we have another reference plane here, and over here too we have the level in there. All right, we have that level in there with this reference planes dividing in this views right there. All right, so I'm going to get away. I'm going to take off all of these views I have in there. I'm just going to delete that. That is for the old project. All right, so I'm just going to leave only the conceptual mask family template. All right, so now we are going to get started. Now with one thing you'd actually notice with the conceptual mask is that you are really mostly at times going to do all of your modelings. All right, you are really mostly at times going to do all of your modelings inside of the 3D view. So you're not really necessarily sometimes going to do them inside of the floor plans, going into floor plans, elevations. You might sometimes go into them, but most of the times you are going to be working inside of the 3D view, which is quite very appropriate. All right, you are most of the times going to be working inside of the 3D view. So now when you head in here into this ribbon right there, you're going to notice we are not really spot with a lot of choices. All right, we just have the create tab, we have the insert if we want to bring in any family in there. They are actually family templates or family libraries for conceptual masses in there. Okay, so we have the create, insert, view, manage, and add in landscape, and we have the modify. All right, we have the modify tab also in here. So we are going to get started now with this in there, and we have this reference plane in there. All right, so now I'm going to get started in here. So in the create tab in there, you notice in here we have our draw tools. All right, we have all of these draw tools in here. So if I should click on these draw tools, let's say just a simple rectangle, and then I come in here and I just draw this out in there, just a simple rectangle, and then I just draw this simple rectangle out in there, and I'm done in here. Now I can hit on escape, out of there, to escape out of there, and then I can just get into this view, and then just make sure I select this, and then I just click on create form in there. All right, so now you notice now that simple rectangular plane has turned into a rectangular form for us to be able to work with. All right, so you notice we have this little gizmo on top of that. I'm going to be calling this a gizmo because I learned that from an architect. He usually called this gizmo. I don't know if that's the right name, I've not really checked, but I'm also going to be calling that a gizmo. So when you hear me say a gizmo, I'm actually referring to this in there. All right, so you notice we have this little, if I should click back on that, or just the line, just hit on the tab key, hit on the tab key a little to select all of that, click on that, perfect, and just select this and perfect, or you can select the top in there, perfect. All right, so now you notice we have this little gizmo on the top in there. So we have this, which is actually referring to the z-axis. All right, so we can just use this to send this up and down, or we can go right beneath the level in there. All right, we can go right beneath our level, and we can go up, we can go down, whatever way we want. All right, and then this one is for our, let me just check this out, and this one is for our y-axis, and this is for the x-axis. So we can use this to actually move this around, and just move this to probably any shape that we want. All right, so you notice in here when I move this, it's actually just moving the shape, it's not moving the ones on the plane. All right, it's just moving that in there, so we can actually create intricate shapes or designs for this building. All right, this is just a conceptual map. So if you want a building with this kind of shape, you can actually do this for that, but I'm not sure you're going to want any building with this shape. All right, you can just bring back our x-axis a little bit, just bring it here, and this is perfect. Let me just put this on the left view, so you see how this is coming off. All right, so we have this little gizmos in there, and you can actually click on this edge of this line, and you're going to notice we have the gizmo also here. All right, when you click on that edge in there, you can just move this a little bit, and it tends to move with that as well. You notice it's also moving with that as well. We can do that also for this as well. We can move with this, and you notice I'm going to click on that box in there. This one is going to just extend that stretch. All right, so you can play along with this and try your hands on all of them. So if you click on some of them, they have different functions that they perform. All right, so if I should click on this one, let me see the red one, you notice it's going to move objects to the side in there. So we have this kind of shape in there. All right, this kind of shape in there, which is quite interesting. So you're going to have these little gizmos on top of that, and you can just go along and play along with that in there. If you want maybe the kind of shape that you want, you'd want a different kind of shape, you can go along and play along with all of that in there. We started this with just a simple rectangle, and we are currently here with these shapes. All right, so now there's one thing you need to know in there. You notice in here we have the reference plane. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this. All right, I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to go in here to draw another shape. But before I do even that, I'm going to go up, just escape out of there. So you notice I just selected this one, just this reference plane, and then I escape out of there. All right, so it's no longer selected. All right, now I'm going to draw a different form, not using the rectangle, but I'm going to use maybe just a circle. All right, so I'm going to start off with a circle. So I'm going to click on that circle right there, and you notice in here Revit tends to remember the previous plane I selected. All right, so that's one thing I wanted you guys to know, that Revit is always going to remember the previous planes that you select. So let's say if you lastly worked on, let's say this plane. All right, let's say you notice this plane is what was selected lastly. So let's say if you lastly worked on, let's say something like this plane, all right, and then you just escape out of there, and then maybe you wanted to draw, and you want to draw out a different kind of form or a shape inside of this tool right here, and you start to draw it, it's going to draw and on that plane in there, it's going to remember the previous plane is selected. So I'm going to select this one, and then you're going to notice it's remembering that plane in there. All right, which is quite interesting. So that's one thing I wanted you guys to know. It's always going to remember the plane. All right, it's always going to remember that plane. So that's one thing you need to know in there. All right, so that's just by the way. And I'm going to get started with one more stuff in there. So let me just click on that circle in there on this form, and you notice in here we have draw on face, and then here we have draw on work plane. So with the draw on face, is actually you drawing on the face of your form or any kind of geometry you have in that plane in there. All right, any kind of geometry you have in that plane, Revit is going to draw that circle inside of on the face of that geometry you have crossing this plane. All right, so if you have a geometry crossing this plane and then you click on draw on face, it's going to draw on the face of that geometry you have in there. But when you choose draw on work plane, it's going to draw on the surface of the work plane, which is this work plane you see in here. So I can actually draw this simple circle on this work plane in there, and you notice it's drawing on that work plane in there. All right, so if I should select this work plane here, and it's notice it's pinned in there, let me just unpin it, and then if I should move this, you notice this is also moving with that because this is being drawn on that work plane in there. All right, so that's just something you need to know. It's always very right for you to actually know what you are doing if you are designing or trying to generate a kind of form that you want. If you want it on the face, you can just go ahead and then select that, but if you want it on the work plane, you can go ahead and then draw it on the work plane in there. All right, now this is not only going to be the only kind of work plane you can have inside of a project. So if I should go into level 1, you can actually add more planes to it. You can add as much as many kinds of work planes that you want. You can add so many kind of work planes if you want. So you can come in here, make sure you are inside of the modify tab, and in here you notice we have plane. So you can click on that, and then you can add as many planes as you want. All right, and then one thing about the planes is that Revit tends to label or name these planes when you start to create them. All right, so you notice in here it's named this plane. It didn't name the plane for me. All right, so if I should go escape out of there, go into the 3D view, you notice we have this plane here. All right, so this plane covers everything in here, and then this plane also covers everything also in here as well. So you notice in here this is set to reference plane 1, and then if I should click on this other one, it's the same reference plane 1. So you can now rename all of those planes in there. With background architect, his own tend to kind of rename its own self in there. All right, so you can click on this and then you can rename this plane. So you can call it maybe 1. I can call this 1, and just click in there, and this is set to reference plane 1, and then I can select this, and then I can click in here and set this up to 2, and this is going to be reference plane 2, but this one is going to be named, I'm sure, this center left right, center left right. All right, so this one is named in there. All right, so we have this reference planes in there, so it's not necessarily going to be about just only those 2 reference planes you are going to have inside when you load the project. You can have as much as reference planes as you want in terms of the design that maybe you want to actually have inside of Revit. All right, so with this circle we have in there, if you should click on that and then you click on create form. All right, now Revit is not too sure about the form that you want to create, so Revit is going to ask you, do you want it to be in this form or you want it to be just a sphere? All right, so you're going to notice you're going to have these 2 pop-ups in there, these 2 thumbnails in there, so you can select which one you want, whether you want a circle for it to be in a sphere form or it should be in this cylindrical form. All right, so I'm going to choose the sphere for now, and then you notice it creates that sphere inside of the Revit software for me, which is quite interesting. So I think I'm fine with this in there, so this is fine by me. So now we have this sphere in here. which is perfect. We have this sphere in there, which is perfect for me. So you can use this, and then you can use this for your project or any kind of project that you want in there. All right, so we are going to be looking at most other stuffs in there. Let me just hit on my tab key, and then make sure I select this entire form, and then just delete this form. And let me just go back into the 3D view. And with this, now you notice I told you guys Revit is going to always remember the last reference plane you used. All right, so now let's say I'm going to draw just a simple rectangle. All right, I'm going to draw just a simple rectangle again. Now you notice it's remembering this form. I do not want the rectangle this way, so I need to escape out of there. Make sure I select it because I want it to be on the level 1 plane. Select this level 1 plane, escape out of there, and then I'm just going to click on that form, and then now I can just draw my form on this plane. So now this plane is being remembered. All right, so I can draw this here, leave this here, and then escape out of there, and then I can just go ahead, select everything in there, and then just create form. But before I create form, I'm going to click on the drop down menu there. You're going to notice we have solid form, and then we have the void form. So we can create a void form of that, and we can also create a solid form as well. All right, so I'm going to create just a solid form in there. So that was just by the way, so you guys know what's happening in there. We have the void, and then we have the solid form as well. So I have this little gizmo there, and I'm going to move this up a little bit to probably the top in there. Let me just tilt this to a better elevation. Let me bring this up a little bit, and this is perfect for me. All right, so this is perfect for me, and I'm going to show you guys how you can actually create those lofted forms where you can actually join two different geometries blending together as one, maybe forming a sweep. All right, so we are going to get started with that. I'm going to go back into level 1, or maybe probably in the same 3D view. You don't need to necessarily be in level 1, and I'm going to draw out the plane. All right, so this is going to be also just a simple form like this in there, and we have this here, which is perfect. So I'm going to escape out of there, and before I draw the next one, I'm going to just hit on my tab key to actually get to the plane of this. All right, the level plane of this, and once this is selected, I'm going to go into level 1, and then I'm going to go into create form. All right, I'm just going to draw a simple circle somewhere around here, and let me just move this to actually blend. Escape out of there, select it, and then just move this, actually blend with the center, some sort of like the center. Go into the 3D form in there, and we have this here. All right, so we have this here on this simple circle that we have in there, and let me just click in here. This is perfect. I can select this one, and after selecting this, I can go into create form, and then it's going to access if you want to create a simple circle or a sphere. But this is not what I actually wanted. All right, so I'm going to go into the elevation view right here, and with this I'm going to create a different reference plane. All right, I'm going to create a different reference plane somewhere around here. All right, so this is perfect. This reference plane is perfect. Or I can even create a different level line. All right, or I can use the level lines or create a different reference plane. You can use absolutely anything that you want in there. So here we just have one elevation line, which is this level 1 icon we have in here. Just the simple level 1 icon that we have in here. I can go into create, and then get into level, and then add some more levels. All right, I can add some more levels if I want. Let me add just level 2 in there. Let me add one more level 2, and this is perfect. All right, so this is perfect, and I'm going to go back into the 3D view. I'm going to select this, and with this I would want it to be on the level 2 plane. All right, I would want it to be on the level 2 plane. So I'm going to delete this out of there, go straight into that elevation in there, and then we are going to draw just a simple circle. All right, we're just going to draw just a simple circle. Escape out of there and head straight into the 3D view, and we have this form here. All right, that's a simple circle here, and let me just navigate to the top of the view. select this and then just move this, and I can use this little arc in there to actually reduce that, and then just move this to probably center, maybe somewhere inside of that circle of our square in there. And let me just move this form. All right, so let me get back in here, and because of this form is being drawn on this work plane, our form here is being drawn on this particular work plane in there. It's not going to move, all right, unless we move this plane, and then this form is also going to follow along with that, with this reference plane as well. So now we've drawn these two little shapes in there, and what we can do now is we can select everything. Make sure you deselect the reference plane, and then you can click on create form, and then Revit creates that form in there for you. All right, so this is how you can actually create those simple kind of forms in there. And one thing you can do is you can create different kinds of shapes and then add all of them together and then use them to create a single form. All right, so it's not necessarily going to be just two single types of shape like what I did here with the square, and then I also added the circle on top. All right, we can do a square, do a hexagon, do an octagon, do a circle, do a triangle, and then add all of them to blend together and form this lofted shape you have in there. All right, so what you can do is you can just select this entire form. You can make sure you select this entire form, and you notice in here we have add profile. So we can decide to add a different profile because we just have only two profiles here, which is the square and then the circle. So we can decide to add profiles to this as well, or we can add an edge, or we can dissolve, or we can create an X-ray, or we can divide that, or maybe a particular surface, and then add some patterns to it and create some intricate kind of facade and all of that in there. So with the dissolve, actually I'm going to be explaining all of this. So with the dissolve, how this actually works is that it's going to delete this. It's not going to delete, but it's really going to, it's just going to undo these forms you have in there. So let me just click on dissolve so you see. So you notice we are back to how we started with just this little dots telling us the direction of how the form was going. All right, so we can actually delete all of these forms, all of these dots, this gizmo reference point dots in there. So you can just delete all of them in there. So that's how the dissolve actually works. Maybe you do not want to lose this thing, but you just want to make some little changes. You can just dissolve the form, and then you can come in here, make some few little touches, and then you can just come back, select everything, make sure you do not select the reference planes, and then you can click on create form, and then it creates that form for you in there. All right, so we have this form here now, which is quite now very beautiful. Or we can just make sure we hit on the tab key and select everything, and then we can add the profile like I said. So we can decide to add a profile in there. So we can come in here and maybe when whatever height or whatever direction you would want, and then you can click on that, and we can now add that in there. So you can, after clicking there, you can go straight into edit profile. And now let me just get into the top view, and then I can edit this profile. All right, so I can decide to go straight away using the hexagon in there. Just click somewhere here and just extend this, and then I'm going to get rid of this entire shape in there, and I'm fine with this. I'm going to click on finish and get into the 3D view. Let's see what we have. So this is now the new kind of form we have. All right, so some of you guys can use this as a building for maybe an intricate design building. You can use this for a museum or something. All right, so this is how you can create all of those forms that you have inside of Revit. But let me show you guys how you can actually create those kind of sweeps and all of those kind of intricate forms and those kind of sweeps and blends that you have inside of Revit. So I'm going to select everything and then delete that in there, and I'm going to start off with those sweeps. And with this, I'm going to start off with model. I'm going to start off with a spline 2, which is this one, and just create a simple spline. All right, so with this spline in there, it works with dots, all right, reference points, where you can actually use them to create. But let me just go ahead and then use just a simple spline. So let me just create a simple spline like this. and come off somewhere here. Now you notice my spline is going off in the wrong direction. That is because we didn't select the right plane. So let me select this plane in there. It's perfect. And let me just click on that, and let me create a simple spline somewhere here. All right, so this is perfect. So we have this simple spline here, and we have these bumps here we can actually use to adjust all of these edges in there that you see in there. We can use this to adjust all of them, and this is perfect. And we are going to get started with us creating a form on this spline using this spline. So maybe if you have a building that you wanted to have this kind of shape, all right, you can just create this spline in there, and then we can start off with this. So after creating the spline in there, what you'd want to do is you'd want to click on this point element, all right, and then just come in here, and then you can drop one point element here, and then you can decide to drop one here. Now the reason why I'm going to drop one here is maybe I would want a different profile on the edges, and then I would want those profiles to blend together with this. But if, let's say, I'm just going to use a single profile, let's say a square, which is going to run in this shape, then I don't need to put a point also here, but I'm going to put a point here because I want two different profiles. All right, so this is perfect. And now we are going to get started. So you can click on this point in there, and then you notice we have this simple reference point in there. And one thing I like about this reference plane in there, I learned that from Backend Architect, was that when you actually select it and then you move it in there, it's actually going to follow along with your spline line. All right, it's going to follow along with the line, which is very interesting. All right, so that's one very unique thing about that. So I'm going to click on this in there, and after clicking on this reference plane, I'm going to draw just maybe a simple hexagon in there. Let me draw something of this sort. I can even extend it to as much as I want, and I'm going to go into the next one, select that, and with this one I'm going to draw out this simple shape. I used this one initially. Let me just use this a simple circle in there, and let me just draw this simple circle. All right, so this is being done, and then what you want to do now is you want to hold down your control key, select this spline line, and then you want to select this shape as well. And after that, you can click on create form, and it says it's unable to create form element self intersecting or single geometry form would result. All right, so let's cancel out of there. Let's delete these forms. All right, let's delete this point and delete this as well, and let's try and finish this off. So hold down the control key, select this, select your spline, and then create form. It says that. All right, so now I think the problem is that we've gone way beyond our reference point plane in there. So let me just select this and just select all of these. It's been selected. Click back on your point, and then let's create that shape again. So let's start off, let's create this shape. This is perfect, and let me try and create one also. I've deleted that point. All right, so let me leave it like this, and hold down your control key to select this. It should work now, and then click here, and perfect. So it means that we went way above our reference plane view. All right, so you notice that small reference plane view, we were supposed to draw within that space. If you want to actually draw beyond that, you need to extend that as well. So now you notice in here we have this intricate kind of curvature in this structure right here, which is actually looking like a cable. All right, so we have this form here, which is perfect. And you can notice when I select this, we have this little gizmo also in there, where we can actually use it to actually make changes to some stuff. And when I hit on my space key on my keyboard, you notice it changes. All right, I hit on the space key, we now have that gizmo where we can now go up with this form, and then if I hit on the tab, it's going to give me the other type where we can actually create different kind of forms. All right, so this is quite a very interesting topic in Revit. It tends to be really complicated sometimes. You can see I'm actually struggling with some of the stuff in there, but when you consistently do and work inside of the massing environment, you're going to get used to it, in this particular workflow. All right, so I'm going to get also started with some kind of forms in there, and you notice in here we have the model line and then we have the reference plane. All right, these two, they actually work hand in hand. All right, so now I started off with a spline through points, and then I went on to talk about the spline in here. All right, so we have this spline through point. So with this spline to right here, you notice in here Revit is remembering the previous work plane we actually used. All right, so we need to escape out of there and make sure we are in the right plane. So we want to draw on the floor, which is the level 1 floor in there. All right, so this is perfect, and I'm going to draw using the points in there. So using the points is going to create the spline using these points. All right, so we have these points in there. You know, when we use just this one, we would have to now add the point element, but with this we have a little gizmo in there where we can actually send this up a little bit, and we have this spline coming here, and we can actually make changes using these points also in there. So now we can now add this point in there to this work plane. They are identical, so we can add a point here, and when we click on this point, we can now go into create form, and then we can create the form on this surface. So I'm going to create just a simple circle so you guys see what I'm talking about. So hold on the control key, select this, and then select this one in there, and then create form. All right, it says it's unable to create. That is because I'll need to delete this point out of the way. Hold on the control key, select it, and then select this one, and then create form. It's also self-interacting, not creating that point. All right, so let me reduce this a little bit. Let me see, and select the line as well, and create form, and perfect. Now it tends to create that form for us, which is this form right here. So you need to play around with all of these and make sure you actually check the size of all of these as well. It's very, very important. Sometimes you are not going to be allowed to go beyond certain heights or certain masses or certain sizes in there. All right, so we've spoken about a lot of stuff in this very part, and I'm going to take off in the next part where we are going to be talking more about setting up stuff inside of this massing conceptual mass family template in there. All right, so I'm going to end here, and we're going to take off in the next part, and I hope you guys have actually learned something. You can drop it in the comment section, and I'll do what to respond to each and every one of you guys out there. So I'm going to end here, and I'll catch you guys in the next part. Peace out.
I'm still working real hard on a Saturday. A future I don't see from a mile away.